recorded and most detailed recorded in the whole of Europe, and it's the best backed up by physical evidence. By that I mean Dark Age inscribed stones with people's names on, names of kings and princes and what they do. There are over 200 in Wales. Named battlefields with big grave mounds of the dead, all the names around the place, sorting things out. Ancient churches going back to the dawn of the Christian era, ancient manors and forts and heaven knows what. And a massive record in different forms: lives of saints, genealogies of saints, the genealogies of the kings, the written histories, historical poetry, the triads, everything sort of interlocking. Charters of the land of cathedral, going back to about the year 400, on to about 1100, abbey charters and so on. And the charters are important because the king gives the charter to the church, and all the princes and his family line up and sign as well, and his brother the bishop or his son the bishop and all the leading clergy do the same. So you've got a who's who down the centuries. And everything seems to interlock and to fit together. What seems to have happened is this. The British claim two places of origin. They claim a migration coming in from Syria. And the Syrian migration, obviously, is a very early one. It takes place around 1600 BC. Right? So, if that is correct, there is a Syrian population moving into Britain at the dawn of the Bronze Age. The reason for moving into Britain is very clear. If you've got tin, you can make bronze. You have bronze weapons which are infinitely superior to copper weapons. So it seems to be militaristic. At the same time as this invasion is said to take place, a vast explosion took place in Britain of what they call the Wessex culture. Marvellous metalworking emerged everywhere. They find it in ancient tombs and mounds and God knows where. And it has no sort of base, no pedigree. It seems to come out of the blue, out of nowhere. The second migration takes place around 500 BC. And it's said to come from Troy, and the British have always claimed to be Trojans. And this was happily accepted until the beginning of the 19th century. Then people in Oxford had bright ideas, and they said, hang about a minute, Troy is a fiction. It never existed other than in the mind of Homer. And if Troy is a complete fiction, the history of a people who claim to be descended from Troy has also to be a fiction. So you have to get rid of this history and throw it out. And an onslaught developed on this history. People ran about making huge reputations, say, I have disproved this manuscript, and I have disproved that manuscript. Of course, they hadn't disproved anything. What they're really inviting us to believe is that for about 1200 years, several thousand writers, bards, monks, historians, all combined together over 1200 years, spread over about 30,000 square miles of territory, to produce a vast, interlocking, totally credible forgery, which would fill a library, and does. And they backed this forgery up with skeletons in stone coffins, with inscribed tombstones that are known to be 1600, even 1700 in some cases, years old. They backed it up with battlefields, with graves with thousands of dead in, etc. In other words, something has gone wrong. So my colleague and I finally decided we'd look into this properly and in some detail. Now, the way to go about it, we decided, was to see if we could track back on the migration stories. Now, there is in South Wales an ancient alphabet known as the Coelbren. Now, generally, it was written on wood. They made a wooden frame, put triangular slats of wood across, and they cut into the slips of wood with a little axe or a knife. So obviously the entire alphabet is a straight stroke alphabet. Can't have any curves. It had the advantages that even if your sight was going or you were in the dark, you could read it. It's like a braille. This has been noted. Again, when they threw the general history out and said, all this history is a big forgery, they also decided that the Coelbren alphabet was a big forgery. So out of the window went the alphabet, or the theory of the alphabet. The the idea developed that it had been invented around the year 1800, which is remarkable really, because there are books of 1580 and earlier and 1520 exhibiting the Coelbren alphabet. And I don't want to bore you too much with that, but I can assure you that the proof is enormous. So what we were doing was something against the trend with academia. The academics were in one direction and we were tending to go in the other. We found that there were Coelbren inscribed stones in Wales, they were in England, dug up in London, they were in the north of England, they were in Scotland, all over the place. And so we decided that if they were the Welsh alphabet, and a man named Coelbren had preserved the cipher to the alphabet in 1560, then we would know which sign was A, B, C, D, E. Therefore, if we had an inscription, all we had to do was look at the sign, place the appropriate letter underneath, and if we went along the inscription, we should come out with a word. And this is what happened. And so we had Welsh words. And for an English person, all you have to do is look up the word in the dictionary, and if you've got an English-Welsh dictionary, which is easy to acquire, and lo and behold, you can read what's on the stone. Some of the first we did, one was of a stone known to have been erected around 950, and it said Higuo Rex. Well, Higuo Rex in all the manuscripts is Higuo Rex, and he's Howell the Good, who died in 948. And his grave mound is about 3 miles from this stone, and his court is about 6 miles off. What's left of his court, it's Upper Court Farm and Lower Court Farm. We found another one, had a floral cross on the top, figure of a man below, carrying a sword in one hand, scepter in the other, his inscription below. It said, Godufan the Exile. We looked up the records. Godufan the Exile is there. It says, Godufan was a turbulent, mad and wild king, for which reason he was deposed and exiled, and his brother Frun placed in his stead. And this proved to be the pattern right around Britain. Everywhere we looked, we found a stone, we could read it, and it always had some correct historical credibility. So we were encouraged to think that we now were on something of a winner. We then found that there were even books in the Welsh National Library wholly written in Coelbren. Some of them were 6th century poems and so on. So the idea that it was forgery was rapidly going right out of the window. What we then decided to do was to check back on the migration legends. How's this thing? Have I got the right end of this, Jim? Shake it a little. It works if you shake it, does it? Yeah. The migration legend, the second one that we took, started here. And the people journeyed around here, and they actually stopped off in Spain, picked up 3 groups of their countrymen, went on to the UK, okay? We also noted that coming out of here, Troy, about 100 years before this, the Etruscans had moved out of the area, and they'd moved into Italy and set up the Etruscan Empire. So it seemed to us possible that we'd have an alphabet in Britain, possibly here, probably here, and here. Because if these people moved, it's highly likely that they took the language with them and their alphabet with them. And we also knew that Pliny the Elder had said that the Rhaetians up in Switzerland, around here, were Etruscans who had moved north. So there was a chance there. What we then found was that there were a massive inscriptions here, there were a massive array of inscriptions here, some up here, and quite a few over here. And they all appear to be in the same alphabet. Now somebody had anticipated this. A man named John Williams of Oxford in 1846 had said, isn't it strange that we find this Coelbren Welsh alphabet all over Etruria, the Etruscan Empire, and all over Phrygia in Turkey? Of course, he didn't say it too loudly. He published it because, again, he's swimming against the tide. Everybody's saying this history's terrible, it's all forged, it's no good, don't look at it. And he's looking at it. So we began to try to translate the inscriptions in Etruria. And logically, we started off with bronze mirrors that only have 1 or 2 words on them. No problem there, they were reading.